Have you ever wondered why some women seem to leave behind a path of confusion, obsession, and emotional wreckage, moving through relationships, men, even entire lives like a storm? It's never just about love. It's never just about connection. There's something deeper going on, something darker, something most people are too afraid to even whisper. Because to talk about it means exposing a truth that's not only inconvenient, it's dangerous. A truth about female desire, one that's not just hidden from men, but often hidden from women themselves. You might think it's all just bad luck. You might tell yourself, she changed. She's not who I thought she was. But if you really look back, really pay attention, you'll see the signs were always there. The pattern was always playing out, just beneath the surface. And when you understand what Carl Jung uncovered in the human psyche, when you view desire, seduction, and the sudden emotional cutoff through a Jungian lens, you begin to see it clearly. It was never personal. It was never really about you. It was about something inside her. A hunger, a deep, unconscious engine that runs on validation, control, and emotional energy. And when that engine stops being fed, when your presence no longer satisfies the craving, it moves on. Here's the hard part to accept. Most of the time, it's not even intentional. It's not calculated. It's not some master plan. It's instinct. It's shadow. It's a side of the feminine psyche that no one wants to admit even exists. And this is the reason the phrase, "her body count never ends," isn't just about physical numbers. It's about the never-ending psychological hunger behind the scenes. In this video, we're going to explore the unconscious mechanisms that drive this cycle. The deeper truths about female desire, truths most people don't want to say out loud. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start here. There's something you were never told about desire. Something that modern narratives carefully leave out. Not because it's fake, but because it doesn't fit the neat little stories of love, romance, or equality. When Carl Jung studied the human psyche, he revealed something most people aren't ready to face. Every human being, every single one, carries a shadow. A hidden part of the mind filled with suppressed urges, unmet needs, and primitive instincts we don't want to admit we have. And when it comes to the feminine psyche, there's one shadow that almost no one talks about. A hunger. Not just physical hunger, not even just sexual hunger, but a psychological hunger, complex, emotional, and rooted in the need for validation, admiration, and emotional absorption. And when that hunger operates unconsciously, it becomes a bottomless machine. A psychological engine that feeds, but is never full. This isn't about evil. This isn't about women being bad. It's not even about conscious manipulation. That's what makes it more dangerous. It runs on autopilot. It's a default setting in the unconscious mind. In Jungian psychology, there's an archetype called the devouring feminine. You see it in myths, fairy tales, folklore. The siren, the seductress, the femme fatale, the dark mother. These aren't just characters. They're patterns, symbols of the shadow side of feminine energy. They attract, they consume, and then they move on. Not because they're villains, but because the inner emptiness is never satisfied. The internal wounds are never healed, and the search for wholeness gets projected onto other people, often men. But here's the cruel irony. It never works. No amount of attention ever fills the hole. No amount of love ever truly satisfies the craving. So the cycle repeats, over and over again. And this is where it becomes devastating. Because if you were in one of those relationships, you've probably asked yourself, what changed? Why did she pull away? Why did she become cold, distant, even cruel? It wasn't random. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't even about you. It was the shadow, repeating its script. The hardest part? Most women don't even know this is running them. It's happening under the surface, beyond awareness. It's not something they plan or plot. It's instinctive. Jung believed that the only way to stop the shadow from running your life is to face it, to bring it into the light, to name it, to own it. But that's rare. Most people, male or female, don't want to confront the darkest parts of themselves. So what happens? The blame gets shifted. She says, he's boring now. She thinks, it's his fault. He's not exciting anymore. Or you say, I wasn't good enough. You think, maybe I should have done more. Both are lies. Both are cover stories. Because the real truth is this: the hunger was never about you. It was there before you. It'll be there after you. It lives in the shadow. That's why the phrase, her body count never ends, isn't just about sex. It's about emotional consumption, psychological feeding, because when the hunger never ends, the search never ends. Let's talk about what that hunger actually feeds on. At first, it looks simple. She wants attention. You give it. She craves validation. You provide it. She wants to feel admired, special, chosen. You go all in. And for a moment, it works. It feels real. You think, this is it. I've cracked the code. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the warmth starts to fade. The smiles become less frequent. The appreciation dulls. Your words stop landing. You feel like a ghost in your own relationship. And you ask, what happened? What did I do wrong? But here's the bitter truth. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just trying to fill a space that no one on earth can fill. Because that space wasn't created by you, and it cannot be solved by you. From a Jungian lens, this is called the pursuit of external completion. When someone carries an unhealed wound inside, especially one they've never made conscious, they start looking outside for a fix, a temporary relief, a psychological high. And for many women caught in this unconscious loop, attention becomes their oxygen. But here's the thing, that attention doesn't actually fix anything. It just whispers to the unconscious, you're real, you matter, you're enough, for now. But like all dopamine hits, it fades. The novelty wears off, the validation stops working. And when that happens, the internal voice returns, haunting and familiar. You need more. Find something new. Feed again. This is the moment most men describe with the same sentence. She changed. But the reality is, she didn't change. The high wore off, the fantasy collapsed, the distraction expired. Now, the same craving that brought her into your life is pushing her out of it. Because attention, no matter how loving, how thoughtful, how consistent, has an expiration date. The human brain adapts. What once felt intoxicating eventually becomes routine. And when routine sets in, the old hunger creeps back in. This is when the distance starts. The warmth begins to cool. The texts get shorter. The energy feels off. And the worst part? She can't even explain why. To her conscious mind, it might feel like you changed. Like the spark is gone. Like something's missing. But in reality, it's the same unresolved hunger resurfacing. The shadow reactivating. Carl Jung understood this intimately. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's exactly what's happening here. The unconscious is driving, while the conscious self is left confused, looking for answers that don't exist in logic, because they're buried in shadow. Here's what makes this even more disorienting. The woman doesn't want to hurt you. She doesn't plan to discard you. She may even feel guilt, confusion, or conflict about her own feelings. But it doesn't matter, because the hunger doesn't care. The shadow doesn't stop to explain. It only moves. It only feeds. And once it no longer gets what it wants from one person, it starts scanning for the next. That's why so many men say, "She replaced me so fast." It's not because the new guy is better. It's because he's new. He represents another hit of psychological novelty. Another round of maybe this time it'll work. But it won't. Because the void inside hasn't gone anywhere. And no matter how many men try, how many compliments are given, how much love is poured out, none of it fills what was never meant to be filled from the outside. And that brings us to the seduction discard cycle. It always starts the same way, the seduction phase. This is when the woman's energy is magnetic. She's fully present, engaged, all in. Every text, every look, every moment feels electric. You feel seen, chosen, wanted. It feels like fate. But beneath the chemistry, something else is quietly happening. You're being consumed. Your attention, your energy, your validation, all of it becomes psychological fuel for her shadow. And again, this isn't conscious. She's not trying to use you. But the pattern is running all the same. As long as the emotional high remains, everything seems perfect. But the mind adapts. The dopamine fades, the novelty decays, and when it does, the hunger returns. Only now, the same man who once brought her joy starts to feel suffocating. What was once charming is now annoying. What was once magnetic is now too much. This is when the discard begins. The energy shifts. The connection fades. The excitement dies. You feel it in the silence, in the empty glances, in the polite but distant tone. She's pulling away, and you don't know why. You try harder. You become more attentive. You bring gifts. You send sweet messages. You think, maybe if I just show her how much I care. But nothing works. In fact, it often makes things worse. Because in her unconscious mind, the shadow is already searching for the next source, the next hit, the next distraction. And you? You were too available, too familiar, too seen, not because you failed, but because your role in the pattern is now complete. This is what makes the seduction discard cycle so devastating. It feels like it's about you, but it's not. It's about the void inside her. A void no man can heal. No amount of love can touch. This is also why the replacements happen so quickly. It's not that she's over you. It's that the shadow doesn't care about closure. The hunger only cares about the next emotional meal. And the moment your validation stops feeling fresh, the next man becomes the next distraction. The cycle repeats, over and over, until the shadow is faced. Now let's talk about something few people understand. Why stability feels like boredom. As a man, you're told to be consistent, be dependable, be strong, be safe. You build trust, you show up, you're present. And at first, it works. She seems to appreciate it. But then, things shift. She grows cold, distant, irritated, and you're left thinking, I did everything right. Why is she pulling away? This is where Jungian psychology hits hard. Because if someone has an unresolved internal void, stability becomes a threat, not a comfort. Why? Because stability creates quiet, and in that quiet, the void becomes louder. Without drama, without chaos, without emotional intensity, there's nothing left to distract her from what's inside. So instead of feeling loved in that stillness, she starts to feel trapped, bored, restless. She starts looking for stimulation, anything to break the silence. Because silence exposes the truth she doesn't want to see. She's not at peace. She's running from herself. That's why emotional chaos can become addictive. The ups and downs, the hot and cold, the thrill of the chase, the intensity of the argument, it all drowns out the whisper of the void. Because in those loud moments, the silence goes away. But here's the painful twist. The man who provides peace, calm, and consistency ends up being punished for it. Not because he did something wrong, but because he unknowingly created the space where her shadow could no longer hide. And this is where men make a dangerous mistake. They try to become both the rock and the storm, both the safe place and the thrill. But you can't be both. You can't offer peace and also chaos. You can't be the calm and the adrenaline. Trying to do so will break you. It will destroy your peace. It will erode your soul. Because the real issue was never you. Her boredom wasn't about your actions. It was about the stillness you brought. A stillness that exposed the disconnection inside of her. And when the thrill fades, when the seduction ends and the routine sets in, the shadow starts scanning again, looking for chaos, looking for excitement, looking for anything that feels like life, even if it's destruction. And this is where the most dangerous belief takes root in a man's mind. Maybe if I just become more exciting, she'll stay. So you start changing yourself. You dim your peace. You suppress your calm. You try to become more unpredictable, more thrilling, more emotionally chaotic. Not because it's who you are, but because you think it's what she needs. But the more you twist yourself into someone you're not, the more you betray your soul. And that betrayal, it never ends well. You were never meant to be her entertainment. You were meant to be her mirror. But a mirror is dangerous to someone who's still running. Because the moment she sees her own emptiness reflected back at her, she blames you for the pain she's always carried. This is the cruelty of projection. Carl Jung called it the most unconscious act of all, projecting your own disowned self onto someone else, and then punishing them for reflecting it. This is why you were idealized in the beginning. Not for who you were, but for what she projected onto you. And it's also why you were discarded so quickly. Not because you failed, but because you eventually became a mirror she couldn't bear to look into. Let's be clear. Not all women operate from this cycle. Not all relationships are doomed to this fate. But when someone is unconscious of their own wounds, their own shadow, their own inner chaos, they will repeat this pattern until something breaks. And if you're the man caught in that cycle, you need to hear this. It's not your job to fix her pain. It's not your job to become her thrill. And it's not your fault that she couldn't love you in the quiet. Some women only know love through chaos, because that's all they ever experienced. Some women crave emotional volatility, because that's what their nervous system associates with intensity. But intensity is not intimacy. Thrill is not trust. Chaos is not connection. So here's the truth you must hold on to. If your calm made her bored, if your presence made her restless, if your stability made her feel suffocated, then she was never in love with you. She was in love with the feeling you gave her temporarily. And when that feeling faded, so did her illusion. That's not your failure. That's her pattern. And unless she faces it, unless she looks into her own shadow, makes the unconscious conscious, and learns to sit in stillness without running, she will repeat this over and over again, leaving behind a trail of broken connections and confused men asking the same question. What did I do wrong? Now let's shift the focus. Back to you. Because in the ashes of this experience, you were given a rare opportunity. The chance to stop chasing emotional chaos, to reclaim your peace, to honor the quiet within you. You don't need to become louder, more dangerous, more erratic to keep someone interested. You don't need to perform for love. The right woman won't mistake your calm for weakness. She won't punish your peace. She won't crave war just to feel alive. She will recognize your stillness as power. She will sit with you in silence and feel safe. She will match your energy, not feed off it. Because she won't be running. She won't be trying to fill a hole. She will have already met her own shadow and made peace with it. And in that kind of union, there is no seduction discard cycle. There is only presence. There is only truth. But to get there, you must first walk through the grief. Not just the grief of losing her, but the grief of losing the illusion. The fantasy that love alone can fix someone. The belief that if you're good enough, she'll stay. The hope that your light could outshine her darkness. That's the hardest part. Because part of you still wants to believe, still wants to fix it, still wants to win her back. But that part of you needs healing too. Because if you keep chasing the broken, you will become broken. If you keep trying to save those who are not ready to be saved, you will drown alongside them. So what now? You sit with your own silence. You build your own stability. You reconnect with the part of you that was never born to perform, to chase, to entertain. You reclaim the power of stillness. You learn to guard your peace, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Because your presence is valuable. Your consistency is rare. Your calm is sacred. The right woman won't discard you because of that. She'll recognize you as the sanctuary she never knew she needed. But until she exists, you hold the line. You stop playing the rescuer. You stop being the emotional roller coaster. You stop blaming yourself for someone else's wounds. And you start living from your center. Because the man who survives the discard, the man who rebuilds from the quiet, the man who no longer fears being alone, that man becomes untouchable. Not because he's hardened, but because he's awake. Not because he hates women, but because he sees clearly. Not because he's bitter, but because he's finally done betraying himself. He no longer trades his peace for validation. He no longer mistakes chaos for connection. He no longer lowers his energy to keep someone interested. He stands firm, grounded, rooted, unmoved. And that, right there, is the man the shadow cannot consume. Because the hunger only feeds on confusion. But a man who knows himself cannot be devoured.